There's not going to be a President Donald Trump. That's not going to happen.
That's about all I can take coming out of the mouth of that poor excuse for a human being. Clooney ranks high when it comes to the Hollywood swamp critters and Trump antagonists because he's the main one that was grand slamming the White Helmets propaganda and hyping the documentary that was produced about them. But the alleged White Helmets aren't really so white like these charlatans like to glamorize them as, and have proven to be more of a facade with unsavory activities going on behind the scenes. Not surprising, really. And this comes from the reporting of Eva Bartlett, who happens to be a Canadian that's done significant work in the Middle East regions. I discovered Eva through the video series of George Webb, and that's George Webb, not George Clooney, and although I disagree with Eva's socialist and religious standpoints, I believe that her reporting is sincere, and she's also been to the places she reports about. It's similar with George Webb, albeit to a much smaller degree, such that he sometimes makes remarks that raises my hackles, but it doesn't detract from the facts of his reporting and his relentless research that exhumes the truth. The Google empire and their crime companions don't like the things George has been saying, and it was during his first year of his video series as he began to gain an audience when I noticed my channel was starting to get algorithmically tweaked. And I noticed it because although I was giving every single one of George's videos a guaranteed thumbs up, it wasn't guaranteed because some of them were becoming mysteriously absent in my public likes. And now the algorithms block out way more of them. Sometimes 5 or 6 in a row are blocked out. They've completely mangled his channel. He probably has 10 times the subscribers that are showing. It's really disgusting how these sick freaks operate. But George is on a mission, and he's an incredibly intelligent individual with a wealth of background and historical knowledge that's both informative and fascinating. And his meticulous ability to connect the dots is astonishing, to say the least. It's been a real journey following George, and I eventually want to elaborate a little more on him, but back to Eva for now. She raises the valid question, why are the White Helmets poised and ready to scurry up and stretcher away the victims of executions like this? Gee, they're even making sure to participate in some brief fist-pumping chants that praise the invisible man in the sky. If you ask me, seeing bodies whisked away so fast like that is a telling indication of organ harvesting. And I don't want to merge too far off the rails with John Podesta right now, but there are many people that like to suggest the painting that Podesta has hanging in his office is evidence that he's part of some sinister cannibalism cult of some sort. Oh, he's sinister all right, but to my understanding, the painting is actually related to organ harvesting, or organ recovery if you want to talk euphemisms. It's one of those wordless messages to their contemporaries, a little wink to let you know, do you need a heart, or any other organ perhaps? Maybe some bone marrow. Podesta's your man, he can make it happen. Coming right up, with what looks to be Clooney's White Helmets right there to make sure it's fresh. So did they recite the same verses of the Quran at their awards show that they did for this guy, I wonder? I've really become to hate most of these Hollywood filth bags and their phony benevolence crusades, and it's somewhat of a sad outcome because I've always appreciated the work and creativity that goes into making a good movie. But I will say that I do find it ironically amusing and not surprising that it's Clooney that's one of the biggest Hollywood adversaries of Trump, simply because I've never liked him at all, period. Him or his acting or his movies. Nothing. He thinks he's this divine human specimen because in the past he did lower-level jobs like cut tobacco and work at all-night liquor stores and blah blah blah. Hey, I'm always campaigning for work ethic, but how do I know you didn't steal the tobacco you were cutting, you asshole? Judging by your existing character, you probably were. You demand some kind of reverence because you've worked at an all-night liquor store? Great, now you've moved on to pimping documentaries that are sickly veils of propaganda while also trying to distract public awareness and smother the reality that Hillary Clinton is a monster, that the CIA are a loose cannon with gangster John Brennan still lurking in the shadows, the FBI is hijacked with Comey as a rabid weasel, with Andrew McCabe as a degenerate pirate still trying to implement a coup to overthrow Trump so they can all continue their big crime rings of uranium, guns, sex trafficking, and opium? Fuck's sakes, I think McCabe must be some FBI test tube version of CIA's oldest freak, Alan Dulles or something. Some kind of cross mutation of the alphabet agencies. It's all total madness, and as George Webb likes to say, the Capitol has become the opium dome. Oh, and as far as George Clooney goes as an actor, lest we forget, he shows no real distinctive changes in his character, so he essentially has no character apart from himself.
Did you see the new George Clooney movie? No, what part is he playing? George Clooney? Oh yes, I'll have to go see that.
Now, returning to Eva Bartlett, she also has compelling things to say about this image that was used by the swamp media theater to champion their cause. She says the parents were actually quite annoyed at how the child was used for the photo, in part because the child's injuries were not incurred by the alleged airstrike reported by the media, but also because the media seemed more concerned with the opportunity of using the child as a prop than they were about any of the events unfolding around them. And a similar haziness arises in terms of the airstrikes themselves and who's really behind them, and more importantly, who is it that's using sarin gas? It's not Bashar Assad. Assad is certainly a thug in my judgment, but he's not doing the things they say he's doing. I think Putin's a thug too, but that doesn't mean he should get blamed for shit he isn't doing either. But that's Hillary's game. She accuses everyone else of doing the things she's doing, and she's nothing but a crime boss in heels, the thug of all thugs. I've said it before, the Revlon Dawn. Now you'll notice the child is holding the actual flag of Syria and not the other so-called Free Syria flag. It's disturbing to me to see these revolutionary flags being symbolized in welcoming committees in our airports and flown here on the streets in Canada. The Syria flag has the red bar and 2 stars like this. It's not this other one. And one can claim all one wants that this other flag with the green bar and 3 stars has revolutionary origins germane to freedom, but what it's currently symbolizing is not a reflection of any kind of democracy or justice or freedom. It's rape and pillage. This is certainly not to say that I think the real flag of Syria represents a beacon of democracy either, but the so-called peaceful rebels that are allied with the freedom flag are largely ISIS and other heathens and thugs. And they are the ones using the sarin gas, and they are the ones using civilians as shields, and they are the ones that are discriminately and indiscriminately killing people. I mean, they're always killing one another over there over their stupid religious squabbles, but that specific situation is because Hillary Clinton and her crime partners want to drive a pipeline right up through the ass of Syria, and, well, Bashar Assad doesn't want that. So it's very unsettling to see these flags being flown in Canada under the misnomer of some kind of democratic movement. But the swamp media theater assures you that these flags mean everything is jubilant and free, and the real menace is President Trump. And, of course, we can't forget about the other branches of swamp media theater that attack Trump, like the Young Turks.
Are you insane, you pathetic losers?
I always knew these jokers were fools, but it wasn't until I saw this compilation video that I realized just how foolish they really are. The compilation video is a splendid rendition of them suffering from Trump's election win and in a state of mourning for Hillary's loss. And according to one of the women, the reason Hillary Clinton is disliked is because she has a vagina. Yes, you heard right.
And the reality of it is that you don't like her because she has a vagina.
You don't like her because she has a vagina.
And this other bitch is a real piece of work too.
I have no respect for women who voted for Trump, okay?
Yeah. Me too.
I think so poorly of them, and the reason why is because, look, I don't think that you're a single issue voter. I just think you're dumb, okay? I think you're fucking dumb. The reason why you failed in life is because you fucking suck, okay? It's because you're a loser. You're a loser. You fucking suck, okay?
Completely mindless, controlled opposition. But it was actually this other guy here that said something that caught my attention.
Tens of millions of Americans are totally fine with a man who's driven almost purely by racism and sexism and Islamophobia, of hatred of everyone unlike him.
Driven purely by Islamophobia. What a fucking imbecile. Driven by Islamophobia. What exactly does that mean? Half the time I can't even believe I'm actually hearing the shit that comes out of the mouths of people like this. All they have is this arsenal of labels they recite like a checklist of camping gear. When Trump grew up working alongside his father building skyscrapers, words like Islamophobia didn't even exist. He was driven to build things and make money.
Yes, sirree, we're going to erect this here skyscraper because we're driven by Islamophobia.
And since it is about high time that I did a wee sidebar on Trump, this would be a good time. This will allow me to draft some points about how I can relate to him while recognizing some of my own personal standpoints in relation to the entirety of it all.
A wee Trump sidebar.
First and foremost, I relate to Trump when I hear him making a remark like he does at the end of this statement.
In just a few moments, I'll be signing an executive order to expand apprenticeships and vocational training to help all Americans find a rewarding career, earn a great living, and support themselves and their families, and love going to work in the morning. Love going to work in the morning.
Love getting up to go to work. That's my kind of talk. You don't hear politicians talk like that. Oh, you hear them talk about the economy connected to platitudes that mean nothing, but you don't see anyone focus so independently on the concept of work as you do with Trump. I will say that Stephen Harper was inclined to occasionally drop comments about work and say things like this.
For example, in Canada, we have proceeded on the conviction that we must live within our means, make sound long-term decisions, and reward hard work and those who play by the rules.
However, hearing him speak about playing by the rules is pretty absurd when considering things like the F-35 scam. But Trudeau has managed to generate far more hatred in just 2 years in comparison to the decade it took for Harper. Back in 2007, I wrote Harper a 12-page letter, and although it might seem surprising, I wasn't even complaining about him. I was voicing my concerns about the spread of socialist views, but also about the direction that our society is going in terms of how work ethic is getting trampled, and the idea of taking pride in one's work is looked at as some kind of alien proposition. And this is where I just don't fit into the zone of generic disdain towards work and the mindset of Monday blues, Wednesday is hump day, and Friday is TGIF. Thank the invisible man in the sky, it's Friday.
Wednesday, come early.
Some might recognize that tiny excerpt from a previous video, and I intentionally left the clip to trail off to include that point where he mentions Wednesday coming early because it illustrates how the giddiness of a Friday has now rolled back to Wednesday. So Wednesday has become the new Friday, and hump day is Tuesday, I suppose. And it's all just a big jolly laugh, because although they're discussing the alleged security of our country, they'd all just rather be sitting on the deck, drinking their margaritas. And when I look at my local politician's new office hours, in her new office, I see they feel entitled to work less and less all the time. But the entire TGIF syndrome goes way beyond the government mindset. It's like a public plague. I get a real chuckle out of people that like to say,
If you value your job, you'll keep your mouth shut.
Such people have no right to be using the word value when they're clearly making an admission that something is wrong but choosing to remain silent. I've been sneered at for a good part of my life now.
You can't change the world on your own, you know.
Especially coming from my own family, and it's always telegraphed with such hatred. But the speakers of such statements fail to recognize their own admission of guilt. A, they're acknowledging that things are wrong in the world and require change. B, they're acknowledging that they have no intention of participating in any process of said change. And C, they hate me or anyone else that chooses an affirmative action. But one's choice of conduct with such matters is not about changing the world as the prime mover. It's about having some self-dignity within one's own circumstances and surroundings. If people did act more conscientiously within their surroundings, it would change the world, dramatically. I like to be really direct with people and say that if you don't care about your job, then you should remind yourself to spit on your food before you consume it in order to give it its proper value. If you live on a self-sustaining farm and you don't care about the garden and the pigs and the cows and the chickens, then they perish, and so will you. But people get away with this, it's just a job, or I don't get paid to think bullshit attitude today because they're so dispatched from the moorings of the concrete aspects of work ethic. But isn't it interesting how people want the character of diligence and craftsmanship to rise up for the products they buy with their money? Yes, sir, there's no tolerance for any signs of carelessness in their Mercedes. It would never do to hear that the guy butchered the installation of your custom teak dashboard because he deemed his work as, well, just a fucking job. That's why most people like to talk about their Mercedes and not how they acquired it. But it shouldn't matter what your station in life is. I would hope you would want to do the best you can and not only take pride in your work, but stand firm behind the work that you do. Workplace bullies only become bullies when people let them, business owners and supervisors alike. I've paid harsh consequences throughout my life because I've spoken up in the workplace while all the other workers gaze on from the peripheral, silent. All the ones that do nothing but bitch about the bosses or company issues while they're sitting in the lunchroom, but say nothing when they're face to face with the person they bitch about. And so coming full circle here, the whole TGIF theme does not mesh with the idea of loving to get up to go to work. Not even remotely. And Trump comes across to me as the kind of guy that if you talk to him up front and you're straight up about things, then he'll treat you with respect. And the TGIF theme is in large part why the social routine includes weekends as a drunken orgy right up until Sunday night to ensure the return of the Monday blues. To me, seeing that whole theme and carousel of uselessness accepted as the norm is obnoxious. I remember a while back hearing a radio broadcast that was coming from one of those news helicopters, and they were discussing an upcoming zombie walk and what day the zombiness was slated for. When it was realized that it was going to be on a Monday, the broadcasters laughed with delight at how ironic that was, because it would be a typical Monday morning. Me? I don't think that's funny at all. Instead, I ask, does that include the pilot that's flying the aircraft you're sitting in? Should he or she be in a hungover, fogged-out state of zombiness? Because after all, it's just Monday, right? I know what Pilot Barbie's answer is to that one. Not recommended, since that might result in the helicopter falling out of the sky and creating an impact on the traffic delays they're reporting about. Trump doesn't drink alcohol, so I don't imagine you last too long working for him if you have a habit of coming to work hungover and unproductive. I was no big admirer of Trump prior to his running for the US election. I like the fact that he builds things, but I never thought too much of his Apprentice TV show. But I don't like any of those reality shows or any kind of television like that for that matter. But I knew Trump was only playing a role for that show, and it worked. What he does usually works. He's a pretty clever guy. This gossipy idea that Trump is stupid is nutty. They all loved him when he was making them lots of money. But Donald Trump didn't have to step up to do what he's now doing and put everything he has at risk. And I'm willing to say that any business shenanigans of Trump from the past with building and construction are of no comparison to the grotesqueness of the sticky mess of the swamp that he's trying to drain. This doesn't mean I condone shenanigans, but just the fact that he has stepped up to the task of battling the swamp indicates to me that he's pretty confident in his overall character disposition. I don't see anyone else stepping up to do the job in the manner it needs to be done. And I really don't think Trump would be challenging the media the way he is. And I also say that tweets like this of his from the past indicates that he's always been serious about addressing and trying to challenge the worst of what's going on, even though he typoed children, but that's not uncommon for him on Twitter. But the Donald is certainly not colluding with Russia, and he's not a threat to the United States. He's trying to save it. And while he most certainly knew it wasn't going to be easy, I think he's realizing that it's going to take a little bit longer than he had perhaps anticipated. And he's also found himself needing to do some unwanted diplomatic pandering and even lying to avoid causing total global disruption. Namely, things like going along with the current narrative of what's happening in Syria. Trump knows damn well it's all a big lie, and he's also well aware that the signatures of the sarin gas used in the initial attacks long ago matched the sarin gas that Gaddafi had cached before Hillary lynched Libya. But it also does stand to reason that Trump would have to move slowly and gradually with things to maintain an overall stability. The level and nature of the corruption is so despicable that it would cause a complete societal paralysis if unloaded on the world stage in one big dump. And in consideration of that, I think Trump is trying to slowly do it in a way that will cause the least disruption and the least embarrassment to the United States. But I can honestly and emphatically say that the slow pace drives me absolutely nuts. And it also doesn't help that, apart from his closest longtime associates, Trump is surrounded by people that can't be trusted. Even Mike Pence is a rotten apple. And Paul Ryan is proving to be more of a scoundrel than I already knew he was. The likes of those two have no use for Trump because Trump actually does want to stop the heroin from pouring into the country, and the illegals and the gangs and all the rest of the malignance that's going on under the color of law. And unfortunately, men like Mike Flynn are being forced to appear in the wrong in order to dismantle the corruption from within. And what the public is viewing and believing is all theatrics, a jungle of theatrics and illusion to hide all the shadow movements. And it's all so down and dirty. And the swamp media theater are very selective when it comes to what they will yield for and what they won't. Let's take this little screen grab article that I've flashed as breadcrumbs on 2 previous occasions, headlined as "The UAE's ambassador to the US is a very powerful filth bag." The mainstream media never went anywhere near it, and again even Fox and the Rebel wouldn't touch it because it's too connected to the overall corruption of the swamp. And one might ask, if the filth bag is so powerful, isn't he wielding his mighty power and suing the author for being so inflammatory and calling him a filth bag? Well, no, and that's because he's not in any position to proceed with litigation, and that's because not only is it true, it's the words of one of his own buddies found in leaked emails. So why exactly is he a filth bag? Well, the leaked emails show that he and his merry band of filth bags plan to have little business cards printed up to act as consent contracts for girls to scribble their names on so the filth bags are covered when they get them all pilled up and drunk and rape them. All under the cloak of debased diplomacy, you see. The subject of the email sent to Otaiba is titled "Vegas, baby," therein discussing how to get around any legal troubles that might occur during their operation, which was later manifested as Operation Dumbo Drop. Dumbo Drop being the code name for exploiting sedated girls, basically, and they're only dumb, really, for trusting a piece of sewage like him. Are there any pussy hats tuned in? The email reads,
"As long as we get consent, I don't think legal troubles will face us. I am going to make up some business cards for the youngsters to sign. Here is the language of the portable contract. I, insert name of dumb girl, agree to let insert name of one of us filth bags, ha 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 ha, hit it. I, insert dumb broad's name again, if her drunk ass can remember it, ha ha ha, am at least 18 years old. Signed, Little Chick's signature. Everything is nice and legal. Smiley face.
And then at the bottom it says,
Out beyond right and wrong, there is a field. Let us meet there.
And then an extra note at the bottom.
Is my diplomatic immunity valid in Vegas?
But as I noted, the trusty mainstream media promptly brown-bagged his situation. And from what I can gather, those that have had to make excuses for him are trying to say he's a nice guy now and doesn't do that kind of thing anymore. But that doesn't correspond with current circumstances, and I say he's still a filth bag because his position is a central hub connecting all the hideous activity that's occurring among the so-called elites. After all, he's the diplomatic ambassador of the UAE, which is nothing but a playground for rich oil sheiks and so-called princes that reside in an intellectual stone age but want to drive a fucking Porsche. They're such assholes, worthless simpletons that would have nothing if not for the riches that the oil has brought them. And when the UAE embassy was turned to charcoal in a fiery blaze not so long ago, under suspicious circumstances, it's not hard to conclude that it's another sabotage mission to destroy evidence that's connected with the rest of the crime network. Likewise with the fire at one of Hillary's houses more recently. And when it notes that there was a 30-minute delay because there were no fire hydrants nearby, I say, and you expect me to believe that? A mansion embassy is not going to have proper fire hydrants nearby? I see they made sure to put in there, the Washington Post reported residents have taken up concerns with county officials about a lack of hydrants in a neighborhood full of multi-million-dollar homes. Yeah, I guess so. Sure, a mansion embassy in the United States. I could see a shithole country, but not the United States. I just don't buy it. In any case, back to the filth bags. After they had been granted princely permission to commence with their Dumbo Drop mission to Vegas, various exchanges took place, one confirming the green light on their mission and that everyone had better be 100% filth bag, out beyond the field of right and wrong, and the other accompanied with a jubilant proclamation that he fucks whores, out beyond the fields of right and wrong, of course. Look at the charade that's going on with this Me Too thing. Certain people are getting their lives shredded to pieces within 5 minutes after someone has made an accusation about them. Accusations with nothing but political undercurrent. Meanwhile, filth like this are lurking around and getting away with doing whatever the fuck they want to do. Why? Oh, because he's an ambassador with deep political connections. But it's also unsettling that within the few articles that did circulate about the filth bag, there are connections made with Jared Kushner. All I can say is that I hope there's no face value to the apparent friendship that Kushner has with this piece of shit, because he's most certainly part of the swamp. As such, all I can hope is that any connection that Kushner has with the filth bag is only strategic reconnaissance as a means to gain information and assist Trump in draining the swamp. Vermin like Oteba are having the time of their life pretending they're noble pillars of excellence, while in the meantime exploiting and infiltrating everything they can get their dirty paws on. Nothing but a piece of walking sewage. But the article also demonstrates that even though it makes Kushner look bad, the mainstream media couldn't jump on it and had to avoid it like a hot potato because it's related to the overall corruption and the swamp. It would shit all over their glossy brochure of the flashy diplomat. Nope, no ominous reporting with dark tones on that. No sir, all the gloom and doom is saved to hurl at Trump. And speaking of dark tones, if we shuttle back in time a bit, which I like to do from time to time, I had saved a real gem of a news report that was covering one of Trump's rallies prior to the election. And I always knew I would toss it in a video because the tone and commentary of the report in relation to what you're actually seeing and hearing is so outrageously mismatched. The desperation of them to convince their viewers that Trump is a short-circuited third rail with a volcanic fuse is quite comical, actually.
Trump supporters are passionate, vocal, and willing to do almost anything to help their candidate win.
Trump supporters will do almost anything. Almost anything. Are you ready to see what almost anything is?
Today, an Ohio judge issued a restraining order against some of Trump's campaigners over allegations some of the volunteers are trying to intimidate voters. Our Jackson Prosco spent a night in the heart of Trump country to find out what those on the Trump train will do if Clinton wins.
They started lining up hours before Donald Trump was set to arrive.
Trump Pence, baby, 216.
Turning a North Carolina farm field into a kind of Trump stock.
You can't buy your way to power. and that's what it's basically about.
But Donald Trump also speaks to a deep-seated anger in America, on full display here just 4 days before the election.
Wow, a deep-seated anger on full display here. Looks really volatile, but get ready for more.
We don't believe the crooked media. Woo! Sorry, but that's the truth.
Wow, did you see that? How's that for deep-seated anger? Good grief, the lady even apologized for saying crooked media.
The truth they seek is spoken by Trump himself.
He speaks for those that are being beaten down. He speaks to those who want freedoms to continue in this country.
But by claiming that the election is rigged and that Hillary Clinton is a criminal, Trump has manufactured a twisted irony, where supporters pledge allegiance to a great democracy, one nation, under God, indivisible, then threaten to ignore the results of the election.
I will not accept if he does not win. No, I will not. I think we need to recheck all the ballots if he doesn't win.
Bring up the subject of Trump losing, and the conversation turns even darker.
Even darker? Whoa, wait a second. We need to back that up just to see how dark that really was.
I think we need to recheck all the ballots if he doesn't win.
Ooh, she said we need to check all the ballots. Wow. Well, because Hillary is a criminal that did cheat.
Bring up the subject of Trump losing, and the conversation turns even darker.
I hope that he wins by a landslide, to be honest with you.
What happens if he doesn't?
America is going to suffer very badly, I believe.
What happens if he doesn't win on Tuesday night?
We're going to have to figure it out.
Talk like that has created fears of violence during or after the election.
Talk like that? Like what? Gee, the first guy said America is going to suffer because he's implying Hillary is a slimy criminal that wants to do nothing but destabilize the U.S. while continuing to rape and pillage the rest of the planet for her and her cronies' own personal gain. And the second guy, well, he said, we'll have to figure it out. Wow, real dark talk.
Some suggest Hillary Clinton would be removed from office, one way or another.
I think the people that support Trump, if for some reason Hillary did win, I think they'd raise up, and I'm guessing that Hillary wouldn't be the president, but her vice president would be.
As he walked on stage, Trump whipped the crowd into a frenzy, cranking up the political temperature by setting expectations even higher.
We're just 5 days away from the change you've been waiting for your entire life. Be very happy.
The reality is that may not happen. But win or lose, Donald Trump's America has been awakened and will not be ignored. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Selma, North Carolina.
I'm not even too sure what the last guy said, apart from rising up, but it didn't sound too ominous to me. But when I see that field of people, especially that lady with her energetic little whoop, I can't help but be reminded of way back when I was a kid and the Highland Games events that we used to gallivant all over the countryside to attend, as my father and older brothers all played in pipe bands. I used to play as well, but was too young to play in a band and never kept the interest. But the point being here is that this sort of atmosphere reminds me more of those days and events, as opposed to the menacing threat the swamp media theater paints it as. But that's a different lane because, as I noted earlier, my family basically hates me now because I get fired from my jobs for speaking up about things, and I concern myself with what's happening to our country, and I write letters to our disgraceful government, whereas they slide neatly into the cookie-cutter category of,
if you value your job, you'll keep about that.
And they certainly don't concern themselves with the yuckiness that is happening to our country because they find it much more pleasant to remain in a comatose twilight zone of ignorance and pretend to be responsible and accountable. But don't dare suggest that people are unprincipled. They'll get tyrannical, even though they divorce principles when it comes to preserving their paycheck.
You gotta live.
Is not a moral guideline. Yet they always seem to say it as if they're the sagely bringer of life skills. I ask, live as what, O sagely one? Or if I ask people if our principles belong in the real world or the unreal world, I receive puzzled looks peering through crinkled eyes as though I must be a little out of touch for suggesting that an unreal world exists.
Goodness me, what unreal world are you talking about? Get a load of this guy, he wants to discuss an unreal world.
But that's precisely the response I'm looking for. In fact, the more outrageous the better. Because it's fascinating that when I speak of acting on said principles, especially in the workplace, I suddenly hear,
yeah, that's one thing. But yeah, that's one thing. But blah, 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 gotta live.
But wait a second here. A moment ago you said there was no alternative world or unreal world for our principles to belong to. There's only one world for them to belong to. And not only that, you were quite animated in suggesting that only crazy folk would entertain such notions. But now there suddenly appears to be an unreal world where the principles are residing. And then, of course, the additional real world where they disappear and don't exist. Because after all,
You gotta live, you know.
And that catchphrase is also delivered with a sneer of hatred, just like continually being on the receiving end of
You can't change the world on your own, you know. You gotta live, you know.
So I reiterate, live as what?